Welcome to The Just Life, where we expose problems of injustice, engage with people that are making a difference, and explore ways that all of us can live more justly in everyday life. I'm Benjamin Watson, and today I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Boyce Watkins. He is a financial scholar, an author, and an outspoken advocate for Black economic empowerment with a PhD, y'all. PhD in finance and background in academia, media, and entrepreneurship. He spent decades teaching financial literacy and speaking boldly on race, wealth, and justice in America. He's the founder of the Black Business School and a leading voice in the conversation around economic freedom for the Black community. From the classroom to the culture, Dr. Watkins has been a relentless voice calling for justice, not just in words, but in dollars. We'll be talking about money, faith, family, capitalism, and what it really means to live the just life in a society built on inequality. The themes for today are economic power and how that translates into the just life. Dr. Boyce Watkins, welcome to the Just Life.
Thank you for having me, brother. Great to be here.
Man, I'm excited about this conversation because this conversation, I think, is a little bit different than a lot of conversations surrounding issues of justice. A lot of times, and we talked about this, a lot of times when it comes to justice, and this is important. You know, protesting is important. Legislation is important. Boycotts. All those things are very important tools when it comes to bringing about justice, especially in America, especially along the lines of race. But it's interesting because you've picked up a different hammer when it comes to justice and a different pulpit. Your pulpit is one of finance, and you talk a lot about economics. I guess we'll start there. You have a PhD in finance from
The Ohio State University.
I set you up for that. The Ohio State University. How did you grow up being interested in finance? You're from Louisville, Kentucky, originally, right?
Yeah. You know, I think like everybody else, I was interested in money, but it wasn't from like I want to become an investor standpoint. I didn't know any investors. I didn't know anybody that ran a business. I didn't know none of that stuff. In my world, if you wanted money, you went to go get a job. My father had a job. He was a police officer. My mother had a job. She was a social worker. I got into the finance thing actually when I got to college. I barely made it into college, by the way. My grades were terrible, man. You know, so I had three options. It was like either go in the military, which I didn't want to do that because the Iraq War started right after that.
Okay.
Or go back to my job at Taco Bell, where I didn't want to do that.
That's enticing.
Right. But, you know, tacos are good. Right. But then again, you know, I met my first girlfriend on the job and she ended up getting pregnant with my first child. Yeah. So tacos get you in trouble every time. Right. and then the third option was like go to college. So the University of Kentucky gave me like a very small amount of money. And that was a weird time because I didn't really have anywhere to go. Like my father, you know, he's a police commander. So he was one of those, you got to get out of here. You got 6 months and you got to go type guys. So, and then my daughter was going to be born, you know, like when I was 18. So I was really scared. I remember being very just lost, you know, just scared to death. Like I just remember walking around. I didn't have a place to stay on the campus at first. I had to figure out a way to get a dorm. I remember waiting for Bojangles chicken to call me back. So hoping I could get a job, you know, make a little money. Yeah. And so when I got to college and they said, well, what do you want to major in? And I was like, well, what's finance? They said, well, that's money. I said, okay, well, I'll major in that.
I need that.
Right. It was like, I need that. If I learn money, study money, then maybe somebody will pay me money to talk about money.
Yeah.
And it was literally that simple. All this stuff. I mean, if you had told me when I was 18 that I would have a PhD in this stuff, I would have thought you were crazy. Just the fact that I was in school till 31. Well, ain't nobody planning to be in school till they're 31.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you know, one thing leads to another, you know, and we all have a unique path. And that was mine, man.
Wow. Yeah, I was a finance major as well. No PhD here, but I did graduate with a finance degree. And I wanted to go to school for like engineering. I ended up going to Duke University, transferred to University of Georgia after at Duke. Although I loved the school, we only won 3 football games my freshman year. And so I was like, you know what? I want to go somewhere else where I'm going to play, you know, on TV and all those sorts of things. And then I ended up trying to figure out what I was going to major in. And it was kind of the same thing I heard about finance, but I love the fact that as opposed to accounting, that I felt was just numbers, finance told like a story. And there was a story to the time value of money and to investments. And there was like all this color around it as opposed to just crunching numbers. That's kind of what I loved about finance. Um, you know, and I kind of see the way you've used and talked about finance in our cultural time that we're in right now, and kind of connected that with history as something that very, very, very unique. When did this shift happen for you, from going from the classroom, just talking about finance kind of abstractly, to where it's, okay, how does this apply to our everyday lives?
It's a great question. When I finished my doctoral work, I got a job at Syracuse University, and in a way, in my field, it was almost like kind of being the number one draft pick, because there was no other Black man or woman on earth that got a PhD in finance that same year.
Wow.
Right? So you get recruited and everything else. And I went to Syracuse mainly because at that time, my number one objective was to be the best in the world in my field. And I was literally okay with dedicating all of my time to training and practicing to be the best I could be at finance. Yeah. So I went to Syracuse because there was nothing to do. I didn't want to live in a city with a bunch of distractions. I wanted to be in a place where, like, I literally even timed the amount of time it took me to drive from my place to my job, and it was like 13 minutes. Wow. And I would go in there twice a week. And because I even calculate like the amount of time it takes to commute back and forth to work. And
you're like, I'm wasting time.
Right. I became a long time ago, I feel like one of the things I figured out that helped a lot was I started to really think carefully about time and calculate like, okay, there's 168 hours in a week. There's 8,760 hours in a year. And I would budget my time. And actually in college, I was like, okay, so I got 168 hours in a week. Even if I sleep 8 hours a day, that's 56 hours. Okay, so I got about 112 hours left. I go to class 15 hours a week. That's 97 hours. If I work a full-time job, 40 hours, I still got 57 hours left, and I can still make straight. So literally all through college, I went from sort of this guy who couldn't figure out academic stuff to literally getting in college and making straight A's is like a piece of cake.
Wow.
And people didn't understand it. And it was because I gained this consciousness with time. So wasting time became more of a sin in my mind than wasting money, right? Because time is precious. You never get it back. So that connection to time never went away. It's still there. Everything I do, it's a habit now. And the thing about finance, and I'm definitely want to answer that question. But the thing about finance that's interesting that I talk to the students about is that there's a really intimate connection between money and time. Really, if you look at wealth, all wealth is an accumulation of money across time. So I tell folks, I say, look, people will talk all day about how much money you've wasted, but what they don't tell you is that you've wasted time.
Wow.
Right. And we can talk about that more in a minute. But so time is big, right? So to answer the question specifically in terms of the transition from Syracuse to what I call the real world, is scholars kind of live in this
tower somewhere.
Yeah. It's not even. I mean, it's not realistic at all. In the sense that they almost look down on the real world. Sometimes they kind of train you to disconnect from the world. And I was like, I'm a Black man. I'm learning the secrets to the universe up in here. I'm teaching all these kids that are going to Wall Street and making millions of dollars. Yeah. But they're the ones who are fortunate enough to afford $80,000 a year to go to Syracuse. I said, if my whole community understood this, we could take over. So I tried to, within the context of the space I was in, do more work that directly linked to our people. And it was just hard to do. It just wasn't practical. It wasn't rewarded. It was almost like I almost felt like I was being labeled as being radical because I cared about the Black community, right? It's almost like this thing, they always tell you, your goal as a Black man is to get out of the hood.
Yeah. And you were like, going that way.
Right. They're like, oh, we got you away from those people, so you should be happy. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be away from those people. Those are my people, right?
Those are the people that need the most help.
Yeah. So it was around maybe like the mid 2000s, maybe 2006, 2007. And I started noticing this internet thing was kind of blowing up. And I remember YouTube first getting started. And I was like, let me just see. And I started doing the math in my head. And I was like, it would probably be more effective for me to teach, 3,000 people or 30,000 people at once, as opposed to just teaching 60 students in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I began to try to find ways to scale technology as a way to take a message and hope that it would resonate with people, far and wide. And so that one thing led to another. And that's kind of how I ended up sort of in the space that I'm in now.
So it sounds like for the academics at Syracuse and other places, your peers, they looked at you little with peculiar eyes because you were going into neighborhoods, that you were from, that you weren't using your degree as they thought you should. However, how were you received amongst other Black folks? Because the reason why I ask that is because kind of getting to this idea of economic prosperity. This is a justice issue when it comes to economics, and some people may say that what you do is not as important as the attorneys or the advocates or activists. Or people who, do other modes of protest. But you would say that, economic prosperity is as important or maybe more important than protests. Like, how were you received in that way?
Well, in America, almost nothing happens without money.
Yeah.
You live in a capitalist society. We live in a capitalist democracy, and it's capitalist with a capital C and democracy with a small d, right? So capitalism is the big brother, democracy is the little brother. And the big brother beats up the little brother and takes his money all the time. Right?
Wow.
So if you really want to understand power in America, you can't understand power in America unless you understand how money flows in America.
So it's not just race or color or ethnic background. It's money.
Money is the lifeblood that flows through the fabric of this society. Yeah. Race becomes a correlated factor. For example, you and I are not in poverty. So our reality is probably better than, let's say, a poor white person, right? I wouldn't want to trade places, in that regard, right? Yeah. But it doesn't mean that race doesn't matter, right? Yeah. We still might have to deal with stereotypes or things that just happen in the community. For example, my best friend, Greg Wilkins, when I was 25, he got shot in the head in front of his daughter by a couple of brothers that were drug dealers, right?
Yeah.
And that does not happen a lot when you're not Black, right? These are Black male kinds of experiences, in my opinion. So race always matters. I don't think we should ever get to the point where we say racism doesn't exist or that Black and white are the same thing. No, that's not true. Yeah. However, there are many examples where we will assume something is related solely to race when it's really the economics that might be driving the disparity there, right? Yeah. I can tell you that being Black is hard, but being poor and Black is even harder. Wow. And when you are in a position of economic disadvantage, what that does is that does not give you the tools to defend yourself when someone might, try to exploit you because of what you look like or where you come from or things like that, right? So, for example, capitalism is kind of this. I've never been a capitalist. I'm not a capitalist because capitalism in its most extreme form leads to slavery. It leads to exploitation. Leads to harm to other people.
You even said capitalism is designed to ultimately enslave you.
Yeah. If
you don't have good money management, that's what's going to happen.
Well, yeah. If you can't buy your freedom, then capitalism will take it from you, and you'll end up giving your freedom away to get the things you need to survive or whatever it is, right? So, but capitalism is also at the root of American imperialism, which has been harmful to other parts of the world. We have a lot of enemies because we would go places and we go to countries and beat them up and take their stuff and whatever. So I'm not a capitalist, but I think that what the mistake is that some people will go to the other extreme where they'll say, I disavow anything that even appears to be related to capitalism. That means if you're a business owner, you're evil. If you're rich, you're a bad person. And so you're sort of almost putting poverty on a pedestal. Like somehow being broke makes you more righteous.
Virtuous or something.
Right. And I've never been more virtuous when I'm broke. When I'm broke, I'm kind of like, I need to go get some money up in here. I ain't got time to be righteous right now. I got to feed my kids.
Exactly.
Right. So I think that finding the healthy balance in the middle is what's really important.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think that the economic piece, I know for people like us, it's critical in terms of us being able to achieve all the other goals that we have. You know, when you talk about something like freedom, to just make one thing real simple.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know what freedom is because they can't even spend the day doing what they want to do because they got to go to work. Well, that right there is a real practical, direct example of what freedom looks like and does not look like. When you're not free and you're spending all your time building that man's business across town and taking care of his family and his assets, then you're not at home taking care of your family and your assets. So your stuff gets neglected while his stuff gets protected, respected, and elevated. You see? So that right there speaks to why the economics must be on the table. It's going to be on the table whether you want it to be there or not.
You mentioned going to work. And historically, since they started tracking, I think that was like 1972 or so when we started tracking unemployment rates, the Black unemployment rate has usually been 2 to 1, twice as high as the white unemployment rate.
Yeah.
You've been in the neighborhoods, you've studied this, you talk about this on a daily basis. Why does that continue to persist?
It's always going to be like that, and it's going to get worse because artificial intelligence is going to wipe everybody out. A lot of jobs are going to be gone from that.
Unpack that for
a lot of folks, especially people that think that they're in these protected classes, the white collar jobs, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
AI is the economic storm that's coming, and no one's paying attention. It's like Game of Thrones. You watch Game of Thrones?
I don't.
You got to watch.
But I heard it's amazing.
Yeah, when you watch Game of Thrones,
I've seen clips. I've seen clips before. There's a giant or something to get his head cut off.
There's the White Walkers, and so basically what's happening is everybody's fighting, and there's people that are saying, "Look, these people are coming to take everybody, so we better get together and stop fighting each other and deal with the bigger enemy." Yeah. So AI is this just almost like this alien species that's coming. These alien immigrants that are coming in to just take a ton of jobs. And so what that's going to do is it's going to increase inequality dramatically. Unemployment, they've talked about numbers as high as 20-25% possibly. And they're talking about short order, 2 years. Yeah. They're not talking about 20 years down the line. So that's going to make it worse. But if you want to ask specifically why Black unemployment tends to be higher, it really comes down to the fact that structurally speaking, we don't own the businesses that are doing the hiring. Okay. And one of the things that we call this racism, but really I call it human nature, is that people hire based on their networks. They hire based on who they relate to. They're hired based on who they know. Yeah. So Black people and white people, sometimes we know different people. Yeah. It doesn't mean that a white guy's trying to be racist if he goes and hires his cousin or Charlie, the guy that he reminds him of himself when he was younger. And so,
which I've actually heard one of the owners, actually the owner for the Panthers, when he hired one of the coaches a couple of years ago, said he reminds me of myself when I was younger.
There you go.
So what you're saying is not necessarily nefarious, although it could be.
It could be.
But what you're saying is that there's part of poverty is a lack of connectivity.
Yes.
It's a lack of relationships.
Well, but here's the thing, though. You have relationships, and those relationships are valuable, but we're trained to believe that they're not valuable. So we leave the community from which we're born. You know, we like the breakdown of the family, for example, has been a multi-trillion-dollar loss for our community because I've got relationships with people around me, and we can build together. I got a relationship with you, him, right? The people around us can build things together with us. But what happens when you're all together and you're all poor, you all scatter because you're all like, well, I'm poor and you're poor. We ain't got nothing. So I'm going to go work for him. You go work for him and she's going to go work for him. When the reality is that what you didn't realize is that actually you do have wealth. Relationships are a type of wealth. You just don't have any money. Gotcha. See, the biggest mistake we make when it comes to wealth is we think that most wealth shows up in the form of these worthless green pieces of paper called dollar bills, which aren't backed by anything, by the way. The dollar bill's not backed. It used to be backed by gold, but it literally has no value. The only value of the dollar bill literally lies in the full faith and confidence of the federal government, right?
Yeah.
So not to say money doesn't matter, but the biggest thing about wealth people have to understand is that wealth shows up in a lot of other forms. But if you're only trained to look for the green pieces of paper, you're going to miss all the wealth around you. Like, I got a beautiful wife who loves me. We build together. We do things together. We do business together. That's wealth. A good marriage with my wife is wealth. If I'm fighting with my wife, we're losing wealth, right? Because all the assets and all the strength we have, we're using it to destroy each other as opposed to working together to build something, right? Those children I have, those children you have, that's wealth. I saw your beautiful kids, man, all 7 of them. And I'm like, this is great. They're sitting in the same room, getting along, watching the same show.
They're getting along for now.
Right. Not for now, right? For now. But what I visualized when I saw that was I saw them 25 years later getting together and running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You understand? I see them all sitting around at the table, with the family business where Daddy Ben and Mama got it started 20, 30 years ago. And now they're figuring out how they want to make the next $1 billion. That's what I see, right? And I know this because this was my life. Working with my brother, I made millions of dollars working with my brother. Wow. And the thing that allowed us to get through the tough times was the close relationship we formed when I babysat him when he was little. We formed a bond. That was wealth being built. I didn't see it as wealth.
So why do a lot of people not see that? Because when I look at my kids, I see visions of that, but I don't quite know how to get there. And William Darity said something. He wrote a book about reparations. He's a professor at Duke. He mentioned the term intergenerational transmission chain. That there's obviously a racial wealth gap. Sometimes it's 10-1. People call it 8-1 or whatever. And we focus a lot on that racial wealth gap from black to white. The fact that black families collectively have less net worth than white families. But he also talked about this intergenerational transmission chain, the role of gifts and inheritances, and how far that goes. Talk a little bit about the role when it comes to. So you said that the unemployment rate is gonna expand because of AI,
right?
And folks who have lower paying jobs are going to be wiped out by that. So that's going to expand. But then the racial wealth gap is actually expanding as well. Yes. And it's not necessarily because of earnings or income, but it's because now all those folks who were earning and had wealth in the past are able to pass that on to their kids. Talk about the impact of that in relation to what you saw from the kids and how we combat that as people who have been oppressed in many ways and subjected to different forms of racism.
Wow. Okay. So you gave me a lot here because
that was a lot.
I want to. It's like a big old.
You can break it down.
Big table full of food. Yeah, I'm about to make. We about to make some lunch right here.
I was irresponsible. I threw a lot of food out there and expected you not to eat all of it.
That's all right.
Let's start from our left to our right.
Okay.
And so let's just start with the. Where do you want to start with the main course? Where do you want to
start? Let's start with the main course. Let's start. Let's finish with the part with the kids, right? Let's start there because the children, when they say, "I believe the children are our future," like they really are. Our black children are the multi-trillion-dollar asset that we do not acknowledge and we give it away. For example, when I go to Chicago, and I know we got 40 schools in Chicago where not one single kid could pass the state math test or the state reading test, that's a crime. That's a crime against humanity. That's a multi-trillion-dollar loss for the community because you're throwing them out there in this crazy competitive capitalist society with no skills. How are they going to survive? Yeah. So I look at that as a black man. I say, well, those are our children. Why are we not? That's an injustice right there. Why are we not yanking those kids out of it? I know my kids are in the school where they're not learning. I'm getting them out of that school. But there are people that benefit. They profit from having those kids in that school. And so then it becomes Democrat, Republican politics. Well, the teachers unions want you to vote Democrats. I don't give a damn who you vote for. Yeah. If that kid can't read, you're hurting that child and it's wrong, right? So speaking of children, let's go to the brighter side. With your children, the reason I saw a multi-million-dollar empire, I saw millions in wealth from just the fact that they love each other and they're getting along. because what I see is 20 years from now, they'll have bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. They'll also have a type of loyalty that is considerably important for the ability to build an institution. Institutions, like whether you're talking about family, church, school, anything like that, institutions have to be built based on a type of faith and loyalty and commitment that is deeper than just, well, how much money are you going to pay me next Tuesday, right? So like when my brother and I got together, he was my first business partner, worked with me when I had nothing to get nothing started. It was cool to have a guy who was going to have my back no matter what and wasn't going to walk away because I could not pay him that week. You understand? So having like that loyalty and you plant the seed for that, right? You're the king of the empire. Your wife is the queen. So by them simply inheriting basic principles from you, that's far more important than the money, right? Because you give them the money and they don't have the value system to match it. You know what they're going to do? They're going to blow the money. We got a whole lot of young kids in Atlanta that are being handed down wealth, but weren't handed down values. And you see what happens with that money, right? So the fact that you're setting the standard, and it can be real basic. Like, for example, my father used to say stuff like, you never steal from family. You're the lowest scumbag on earth if you ever steal from your family. You always stick by your siblings. Yeah. So we kept that in our mind. So later on in life, my sister and my brother, when we get together, there's not really much of anything that can happen that will cause us to fight each other because we just don't do that. You see? So ultimately, when you're talking about where wealth comes from, right? The thing about wealth that people don't understand a lot of times is that most wealth in America and around the world is what I call gang affiliated. Gang affiliated. Yep. And I'm not talking about just like Crips and Bloods, but that could be an example.
There's a lot of types of gangs.
Right. And it's so a gang, what is a gang? It's a group of people that get together for a common cause that have a code of conduct. Maybe they wear the same logos, right? You look at Apple Computer. Apple ain't nothing but a big economic gang. It's a bunch of people. They all got to follow the same rules. You don't follow the rules, you get kicked out the gang. They wear the little Apple logo on their shirts, and they all have the same objective. So they're working together in this collective fashion to build trillions of dollars in wealth. The Asian Pacific Union is a bunch of Asian countries that got together and said, let's form an economic gang. NAFTA is an economic gang. America, Mexico, and Canada got together and said, let's work together. We're going to, establish trade relationships with each other so that we can all be strong together. The European Union is an economic gang. You got other gangs. Police force is a gang. Crips and Bloods are gangs, right? Your family is a gang. Can be a gang, right? So, because seriously, if you think about any family where they're loyal to each other, like nobody picks on the kid who's got 6 brothers and sisters that are all ready to fight.
Yeah,
right.
Don't nobody mess with my kids at school.
Exactly. So
there's gonna be some smoke.
Right. So when they destroyed our families, when they convinced us that family does not matter, what we don't understand is that we lost trillions in wealth just from that, because everybody's out here trying to do it by themselves.
How do you? Okay, you said something very important. I want to put a pin in that, and just camp out there for a second, because part of the conversation around racism never really goes there. It never goes down to what the future impact in economic power of what's happening now. Or if you look at retrospectively, we don't think about the economic impact that we're experiencing now as a community, and what it would have been if things didn't happen. For example, everybody understands about Tulsa, and Greenwood now, Black Wall Street. Some people didn't find out about Black Wall Street till like a couple years ago. Like it was new to them. But we look at Black Wall Street and we say, man, this was a place, and it wasn't the only place. There was Wall Streets in Durham and in Wilmington and other places. But this is a place where Black people were successful, and then it was totally destroyed by white townspeople, by the government in those places. And we'd never think about what that could have been financially, not only for those families, but for their children's children. So how do we account for that piece of it? How do we educate about that piece of it? But also, what's our response right now so that we have that generational wealth moving forward? I think that's where you were going.
Okay. So when you talk about Tulsa, you're right. We didn't just lose what we lost in Tulsa. We lost everything that it would have become. It's almost like if if a woman dies and she's pregnant, you didn't just lose a woman and a baby, you lost a whole bloodline, right? So effectively, that can be calculated just through compound interest and things like that to get a number. And I don't disagree with that at all. I think the reparations conversation is a simple one. You know, the number is about $14 trillion, and even that's not enough to compensate for everything that we went through, without a doubt. Now, then there's the practical aspect of it. The United States is what, $38 trillion in debt. They tend to pay for the things that they care about. They don't pay for the things that they don't, right?
American interest.
Exactly. And so the question then becomes, what's your plan to get that money? It's almost like when a bill collector says, well, when can we expect payment? And Steve Harvey said, well, you can expect payment whenever you want, right?
Like, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the question is, we can expect payment.
Yeah.
And the question is, are we willing to really demand that payment? Like, are we really willing to do the work required, the ugly work, to force their hand on this issue? And that might mean, you know, if you talk about the politics, it might mean saying, look, I'm not voting for you unless you begin the process of compensating us. Yeah. And I've taken that position. But I know a lot of people who aren't willing to take the position because politics gets funny. It's like, you know, you get into the, well, no, you gotta keep this person out of office because Trump will kill everybody or you know, whatever, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think the solutions, the best solutions I've seen haven't really so much been political. I tend to work with stuff that's real, like what's right in front of me. Like I'm the guy who says, like if I see a whole bunch of people waiting with a bus ticket, waiting on a bus ride, and the bus ain't coming, I'm the guy who says, well, I can at least start walking. Right? Let's just walk, and maybe
this is where we want to go. How do we get ourselves there?
Exactly.
With what we have right now.
Exactly. And that's a part of my personality. When I was a kid, I used to hate waiting for my parents to give me a ride somewhere. So my grandma got me a moped. Man, I would ride that little moped 50 miles, right? Because there was something empowering about knowing that I could do something to improve my situation without waiting for other people, right? So I think that as a community, we could use some of that, right? Yeah. Okay, there's what other people did us wrong. They did take our stuff. They do owe us. And I think we should demand that they correct their behavior and compensate us 100%. But the question then becomes, what are we going to do in the meantime? You know, or are we going to sit in the victim box, which unfortunately becomes the box where there's no accountability for your own choices? It's the powerlessness box. I don't want to sit in the powerless victim box because there are some things we can do. For example, if I was to line up the richest countries on earth, about 96% of those countries would have less income per year than the African American community. Our $1.8 trillion that we bring in every year, most of which we give away to other people, we could literally buy the entire NFL 5 times every year if we wanted to. I mean, just to tell you how much money that is. We're right up there with Mexico and I think even Canada. We're beyond Russia in terms of the amount of money. Saudi Arabia. We got all those countries beaten. So we've got something to work with. Right. So what I say to people is I say little things like, I say, well, you do know that no matter how poor you are, because here's my problem, man. When I first started talking about wealth.
Tell us the problem. Cause I know you got some stories about how people reacted to you when you talked about wealth.
When I first started talking about wealth, I would go on urban radio stations and they were like, well, black people really don't want to talk about wealth. They want to talk about fun stuff and partying and all that. And I'm like, no, we're not kids. You know, we all need money. I think they want to hear about wealth. And so in order to deal, the other pushback I got was, I think some people thought that they would assume that I was elitist, you know, because it's like, oh, you're a professor. You don't understand what we're going through. And I was like, no, actually, I understand poverty more than you do. I was born in the projects. Any poverty story, if you want to do the poverty Olympics, I'm going to get a gold medal.
I can one-up
every story you tell me, I can one-up you, right? I can tell you about having a roach on my sandwich and flicking it off, and I keep eating because I don't want to waste a good sandwich, right? I know all the portions, so stop that, right? And then, so what I did was, I said, okay, so you're telling me that black people can't afford to invest and that I'm just a pie in the sky elitist for encouraging people to invest in the stock market. So what I had to do was I had to explain, number one, you have to invest in the stock market because the stock market is the number one wealth builder in America. This is based on the data and the science. It's the number one wealth builder. So I said, okay, let's start with the basics then. Let's say that you, so they would say black people can't afford to invest. And I would say, well, okay, so can black people afford chicken? And they'd be like,
why you had to pick chicken?
Right. I picked chicken because I know what the answer is going to be. You can't say no. You can't say no, right? So I'm like, okay, can black people afford chicken? And they're like, yeah. Okay, well, let's say that you take $5 a day, which you can't even buy a Popeye's chicken value meal for $5. But let's say you took $5 a day or $150 a month, and you literally were just randomly picking stocks to buy in the S&P 500. Just literally randomly picking some Nike, Google, whatever. Just as long as you're picking the S&P, you close your eyes, just randomly grab a stock every month, right? And let's say you did that for 10 years. Well, after 10 years, based on the history of the stock market, you'd have an average of about $29,000 liquid in your account, roughly, give or take a couple thousand. At that point, you're not poor anymore. Because there's no poor person in America who has $29,000 liquid.
But the poverty is before that. The poverty is when you talk about those little kids that were in Chicago and other places that aren't passing their reading, can't pass the aptitude test. Then they grow into adults who, many of them, don't read at an adult level. They're going from job to job. Part of that, some of that is because of different systemic factors, racist policies, whatever it may be. And so for those people that you're talking about, some of them would say, look, Dr. Boyce, I agree with you about the stock market, and I could spend the $5 or whatever and not buy the chicken with it. But I don't even know like what the stock market is because I haven't been educated on it.
Right. And I think that's a great
part of poverty is not just a lack of funding, it's a lack of understanding and a lack of certain conversations that happen around people that aren't living in poverty, right?
Now I do agree with you. Now here's here's the thing. In the example I gave, the ability to read is not a requirement. Let me explain like this. In 1971, a guy named Burton Malkiel did an experiment. And what he did was he taught monkeys how to invest. He did, but these were not special monkeys. They didn't go to college. They weren't monkeys that could talk. All they knew how to do was throw a dart at a wall. He taught them how to throw a dart at a wall, right? So, and what he did was he would have them throw the dart at the wall, and wherever the dart landed, that was the stock that they would pick. So if the dart landed on Nike, they would buy shares of Nike. If it landed on Ford, they would buy shares of Ford. So he created this basket of stocks that were picked by the monkeys throwing darts at a wall. And so then what he did was he compared the amount of money the monkeys made to the smartest, most educated experts on Wall Street with Harvard master's degrees and everything else. And they replicated the experiment, scientific method. You got to do the experiment over and over again to make it work. And do you know what happened? The monkeys won the monkeys won the contest half the time. The monkeys won half the time. So my question, because maybe I'm just a smart ass, but when people will say, well, I don't know how to do it or whatever, I would just say, well, are you smarter than a monkey? I know another racial stereotype. Right? We've been talking about chicken and monkeys.
I mean, you gonna throw watermelon in there too?
Right. Are you smarter than a monkey holding chicken in one hand and watermelon in the other?
Some of the people that might feel the most foolish are those who are in school right now to be stockbrokers.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing, though, right? It doesn't mean that going to school is bad. I've never been a person who said education is wrong or whatever. Yeah. What I'm saying is, like, a lot of times, I think sometimes, man, we make a problem bigger than it actually is, right? A lot of the economic problem, it's not just like an educational problem or an access problem.
Yeah.
A lot of it's a cultural problem.
Okay.
Because the culture guides you away from the things that you can do to make your life better. The culture guides you.
What do you mean by the culture? Like specifically?
If you watch BET and you look at crazy stuff people spend money on, when I meet people that are struggling financially, but their car note is like 4 times bigger than mine. And I'm like, and I have money. I could afford an $800 car note too, but I don't have one. But you're telling me that you can pay that car dealer $800 a month, but you can't put $100 a month toward the future of your family. Do you see what I'm saying? So I would ask the horrible question of well, do you love your child as much as you love your car? Wow. Because here's the deal. If you understand compound interest, man, which I know you do, $800 a month The example I gave was $150 a month. And you saw what $150 a month can do. $29,000 after 10 years, or a little bit less than, I want to say a little bit less than $200,000 after 20 years, or actually over 100,000. I'm sorry, after 20 years is 100,000. After 30 years, it goes up to about $250,000, give or take a few thousand, maybe 245 or something like that. If you're talking about $800 a month in that car note, you're roughly taking that number and multiplying it by 5. So that's $500,000 that the car dealer and his family is going to have.
Yeah.
Because you paid your bills on time. See, so what I've said to people is I've said, look, you ain't got to get rid of your $800 car note. You ain't got to stop with the cell phone bills. You ain't got to, I'm not telling people not to buy Jordans or whatever. Do what you want to do with your money. Just make sure that you prioritize yourself before you prioritize everybody else.
Well, why do you think the culture elevates those sort of bad financial decisions? And do you think it's always been that way? What changed? When was the point where those things came about? I mean, I'm only 44 years old, so I can only speak for my time on this earth. But I got to believe that at some point there had to be a shift to what we see now. Have you seen that at all in your research?
There is a shift, but it's always been there. Remember, this is a capitalist society. Capitalism is what I call a pimp and hoe kind of construct, where basically you've got individuals that sit at the top of capitalism who are able to control the behavior of the masses in a way that economically benefits them. The same reason that the Rockefellers spent so much money funding medical schools, because they wanted to shape how doctors were educated so that they would prescribe certain medications that happened to put money into the pockets of the Rockefellers. You know what I'm saying? So effectively, America is a consumer-driven culture because 70 to 80% of the American economy is driven by consumer spending.
Wow.
So their goal from the very beginning is to make sure that you and your babies are addicted to consumption at a very early age. Studies show that children start to recognize brands and materialism when they're 3 years old. So so this is if you look at media and you look at what's promoted, what's marketed, how many ads you see a day. I think the average child sees like 50, 60,000 ads a year or something crazy it's some massive number. So that's where it comes from.
So this is where my brain is going. My brain is going to, okay, I agree with everything that you're saying. I agree that many times culture promotes bad financial decisions. It emphasizes material over wealth building. It emphasizes instant gratification over delayed investment and delayed gratification, all those sorts of things. And I also understand what you're saying about there is a capitalistic influence and a necessity for those things to happen. Where I'm going to now is, okay, who is the they? Who is the they that is promoting these types of decisions and influencing the culture? And is the they influencing certain demographics intentionally more than others?
Yeah. Okay. The they would pretty much be, it's real interesting when you say that, right? Because so you think about the way a corporation is structured. The shareholders own the company. Like I own shares in a lot of different companies. And so what happens is that according to the way companies are supposed to run in America most efficiently, like people like Milton Friedman believe this from the University of Chicago, is the job of the manager of the company is simple. Maximize the wealth of the shareholders. If you don't do that, they're going to fire you. So when they're trying to figure out how do we maximize shareholder wealth, well, they're not really thinking along ethical boundaries, right? Because the government's supposed to give them their boundaries. The government's supposed to tell them, look, you can't market this drug, this to kids. You can't sell this to this group of people, whatever. The government's asleep on the job. Yeah. Because the capitalists have pretty much, they run the government now, right? So when there's no guardrails in terms of how they go about manipulating people's thinking, their goal is simple. Like, I'm going to study you like a lab rat and study all your behaviors, all your patterns, and do whatever I can do to get you to buy this product. So
it's like an algorithm.
Yeah. So if you are selling something easy and addictive like liquor, and you're like, okay, black men have a lot of anxiety and depression and everything else, and a lot of men got jobs, and their culture, it tells them to drink and smoke a lot. I'm going to go to these neighborhoods based on the data These demographics are great places to put liquor stores next to the gun shop and the check cashing place, right? Right. And then I'll put the fried chicken place right there too, right? Because maybe I'm dealing with a demographic that isn't very health conscious. And that's where the educational disparities and all that stuff may come into play, because all the studies show that they tend to promote the most unhealthy stuff to us. But the thing is, you still have choice, right?
Yeah, you still have agency.
Right.
Yeah.
In neighborhoods where they don't allow you to put the gun shop next to the check cashing place, they can't do that, right? They're like, okay, so these people are more conscious about their health and they don't want us doing business in their neighborhood. Well, we'll go to this neighborhood over here because they're not as protected, or maybe because they're stuck in survival mode and they're just thinking about getting something to eat. They're not thinking about the health of the food that they're eating, right? So I'm going to put the fast food restaurant in that neighborhood because these people are easier to exploit. So capitalism does exploit, but I don't think it does it just based on race. Where race does come into play, though, for example, is when you look at the difference in, for example, in the way America dealt with the opioid epidemic versus how they dealt with crack.
Oh man,
that's where you see race really pop up, right? When we have the crack kids and all this other stuff, when they put the crack in our neighborhoods, it becomes like this personal failing. Oh, you should have done
pathology.
Better. What's wrong with you, right? And then the opioid thing is like, oh, these poor people. Let's make laws and make these people pay for what they did, with the opioid.
When in fact, part of the opioid crisis was because doctors would overprescribe pain medications for white patients because they felt like they felt pain more than black patients did.
That too.
So they're flooding already, and then it got out of hand. Do you see, kind of going back to putting the check cashing place and the way capitalism works, which makes sense from a business standpoint, right? But do you see that as possible injustice, or is that just good business?
No, I mean, it's not. The definition of good business, I think, would vary from person to person.
Yeah.
But
you understand what I'm saying? So like, if you're placing liquor stores or check cashing places, all those sorts of things, which I've even heard you say that all check cashing isn't bad. But do you see that as an injustice in taking advantage of people's, needs and their chaos, so to speak?
Well, it's kind of one of these things that's hard to.
Or is it just capitalism?
It is. And capitalism don't give a damn about justice. Capitalism is Darwinian. It's survival of the fittest. That's it. And I don't think any normal person would want to live in a pure capitalist society. In fact, America has become so capitalist that I think that's going to be the downfall of this country, actually. That's what it would be hard for me to imagine America existing as it exists now, say 200 years from now. I don't think that's going to work. Yeah. Because capitalism is built on greed and insatiation. You just want it all. You just, you have guys like Elon Musk with $400 billion in the bank. Who needs $400 billion? Who needs a net worth of $400 billion? $3 billion is amazing, right? Why you need the other 397? Can't you? There's homeless people, right? Yeah. So that excess and that greed, which is going to be exacerbated by AI and technology, is just unacceptable if you care about human beings, right? Like the idea that we live in a country where we spend more on healthcare than any other country on earth, and the healthcare is pretty mediocre, is a problem. When you're talking about doctors overprescribing certain medications, to understand that behavior, all you got to do is follow the money. They economically incentivize the doctors to prescribe this over that, right? And again, you go back when the Rockefellers were pouring all this money into medical schools, they wanted to train the doctors to do exactly what they do now, which is prescribe a pill for something that you probably could have prevented naturally, but they're not trained to. They're not trained in holistic health. They're not going to tell you like, okay, if you just do some jumping jacks and stop eating so bad and drink some water every day, you could have avoided this issue. Their response is, here, take a pill for this, take a pill for that. Like psychiatric medication. Studies show that Americans are heavily overprescribed on psychiatric meds. In fact, we buy most of the psychiatric meds that are produced on the planet. Ozempic, if it wasn't for Americans, there wouldn't be a business for Ozempic. Yeah, they don't sell Ozempic in Japan. Why? Well, because they have policies in place that encourage exercise and healthy eating. Americans, we're like the fattest people on the planet. Think about this. This is what's crazy. This is what capitalism does. We spend the most on earth on healthcare, but we are the fattest, sickest, people on the planet. And on top of that, we have the lowest quality of life.
Make it make sense.
Highest divorce rate, most mental health issues. Like if you name every aspect of quality of life, Americans are way down the charts. But when it comes to money, we got the most money. So this is a country that, in my opinion, collectively has sold its soul for those worthless green pieces of paper. And that's why I actually respect you so much, because I know that your consciousness is beyond that. Like when I met you and you were like, I've been married 20 years, I have 7 kids. I said, okay, this is a man that understands the things in life that are more valuable than money. A lot of people don't get that.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot of myths that are perpetuated, specifically in the Black community. We touched on some of them, but what are the most dangerous myths that you've encountered, even in relation to finance in the Black community?
Well, one time I was watching this episode of SNL, and they did a skit called Black Jeopardy. And in the Black Jeopardy episode, it was Leslie Jones, and the question, and Keenan. And Keenan, in Jeopardy, they give you the answer, and then you ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, your boss wants to take $50 a week out of your check to put it on your 401k. And she hits the button. She goes, you better give me my $50 so I can buy me some scratch-offs. Right? And right. Apparently this was funny because it's like, oh yeah, that's real Black. That's what those people do. Yeah. Yeah. And so this idea that all of us want to engage in what I refer to, actually in my book, it's called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. In my book, I call this economic immaturity. There is a perception that African Americans, particularly us as men, that we embrace economic immaturity. And Malcolm X talked about this, that America likes to see, particularly the Black man, they like to see us show up as either a little boy, a little girl, or a buffoon. Wow. Right? One of those 3 things. If you show up in one of those 3 ways, then America kind of makes room for you. But if you show up as a man who says, no, I want to be a grown up. I have, no, I don't need to work for you. I have my own business. I have a wife and I love my wife. I don't have 50,000 girlfriends and babies mamas. I got a wife and children, right? There's not a lot of space for that, right? That's not, it's like, oh, well, you're a pink unicorn or something, right?
Yeah.
And that's just not true in my experience. I know lots of men that do fit that description, and America does not typically broadcast that to the world, largely because our quest for what I think, honestly, isn't authentic justice, but our so-called quest for justice tends to present the Black male most readily if he is a victim of something, right? So like George Floyd will get more screen time than every Black man who made different choices or is in a different situation. Nothing against George Floyd. Yeah. There is, you could argue there's an injustice there. It depends on which side of the fence people are on. But I will say that I was raised by a man to be a man. And I don't think that that's something that America likes to see. Well, largely, if you think about that, if you think about oppression, it's really hard to oppress a grown man. If he's not afraid of you and he's just as smart as you and he's just as ambitious as you.
But that would be why those situations wouldn't be broadcast.
Exactly.
That would be why America wouldn't want to broadcast it.
Exactly. And so America won't broadcast us, but we have to broadcast ourselves.
And that's what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to show up for the cookout, whether you invite me or not. Right. And this is what we're in. And I think that's the thing that we have to understand is that ain't nobody out here going to feel sorry for us. Ain't nobody out here going to save us. I don't even know how many true allies we really have. I don't know if anybody really allies with anybody else. I believe most communities kind of take care of their own. If I talk to an Asian man or a Jewish man, I'm not mad at that Jewish man for caring about Jewish people. Yeah. This is what you're supposed to do, right? So, and I say, I'm a Black man. I care about Black people. And then we sit down for lunch, and there's not sort of this hierarchy where I'm sitting there saying, well what are you going to do for me? He's going to be like, nothing.
So exactly. So part of doing justice, let's talk about doing justice within, because obviously we talked about the reparations piece. You would say, yes, there are reparations that are owed, not even for enslavement, but really when you think about Jim Crow, which is much more recent, and there are living survivors, my parents being 2 of them, of the Jim Crow era.
Yes.
But that's most likely not coming. So that can be true that there are reparations that are owed from a justice standpoint. But what is also true is that to have economic empowerment, there needs to be doing justice within our own communities.
Yes.
Walk me through a little bit of, what are the steps for someone, who does not have a doctorate in finance and does not have the Black Business School and did not read the 10, like the commandments for finances in Black communities and did not do all these sorts and have these courses. What is their role in doing justice within our own community?
First off, I think everything starts with love. Love is powerful. It's a life force. We exist because of love. Somebody loves somebody, and that's how we all came to be. And I think love is stronger than hate. Hate takes energy, but it's a toxic energy. It kills you and doesn't really solve the problem that you have. And so I think that if we start off and we say, okay, I say as a Black man, my goal and my job is to love Black women as much as I can, love my brother, love my children, love my community, right? I call you my brother. That means your children are my nieces and nephews. My children are your nieces and nephews. Do you see? So when you start there, a lot gets built on top of love in the sense that at that point, you can establish institutions that are critical that were lost in the community. Family.
Yeah.
There's never been a community in the history of this world that has ever been able to prosper without family. This false idea that we can just sort of forget about it and just act like it's a thing of the past, like, this is the way it is. There's no prosperity there. The lowest net worth in America is that of a single Black mother with children. Next to her is the single Black father with babies' mamas. Because the child support courts eat up all your money, right? So if you talk about just from that economic justice standpoint, you're doing a huge injustice to yourself when you're not thinking in terms of structure or institutions in terms of how you move. And I feel like as men, we have a big responsibility for that because our energy is strong. Testosterone gives you power, whether you believe it or not. And so a good man can elevate and create something amazing. He can build empires. A bad man can traumatize the next 3 generations, right? Wow. So starting with that word love, right? My goal is to just receive love, give love, be in spaces of love. That's I think a simple idea that doesn't require complex thinking. You ain't got to have a PhD to know what it means to love and to be loved. And then, so you're building family. What else might we do? Well, when you talk about things we train children on, I believe that we have to train our children to pour into us as a community instead of being sort of tricked into pouring everything into somebody else's space.
Yeah.
We give away multiple trillions of dollars every generation because first thing we do is we train our kids to go work for other people. And it's okay to, get a job. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying that you also need business development in the community so that there are jobs within our spaces. Why? Well, because when you go out and you leave your space of love and protection and support to go into hostile territory, it's like you're a basketball player, and you're always playing away games every time, right?
You know what, that Ohio State crowd,
right?
Huh?
There you go, right. There you go, exactly. So ultimately, when you think about these millions of kids we send off to college, we have a lot of kids, for example, that might major in something like business management. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? That means you're being trained to manage a business. The question is, well, whose business are you going to manage? Well, I got to go find somebody's business so they'll let me manage it. Well, how about we have some business development in there so that when they come out with the business management degree, they can come back and manage a business in their family or in their community. Infrastructure must be created because here's the thing. We spend so much time complaining and being mad and protesting the fact that someone else won't let us have a seat at their table. Right, we're real big on Black faces in high places. I want to be the one Black guy who got the job at the such and such.
Yeah,
why? That never has a community prospered because one person got a job. Communities don't prosper from people getting jobs. Communities prosper when you build institutions that support the masses. Yeah. I'm looking for that Black person who says, "Yeah, I built a factory and we employ 10,000 of my people over in this factory." That's what I'm looking for, right? You look.
As soon as you do that, however, though, there's going to be discrimination charges.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Here's the thing, though. But here's the thing, right? You don't have to discriminate. You know, like, for example, even in the Black business school, we don't discriminate. People think that because we're the Black business school that we just tell white people to stay away.
No, you're open to anybody.
Exactly.
But it's always a tipping point.
But
if,
you know
if
what?
there's too many, they're not going to come.
You know what? Every white person that hears me talking to you is welcome to come learn from me.
And they will learn a lot too.
Exactly. I've been teaching white people my whole life. Exactly. I ain't got no problem with white people. See, that's the funny thing, man. People think that if you love Black people, you got to hate somebody else.
Which is not true.
Exactly. I ain't got time to hate nobody. But don't get mad at me for loving myself. I get it though. For some people, me just simply loving my own, it's scary for them. Because Black people don't get love from anybody. I don't think.
Well, it goes back to what you said about, what Malcolm said about how a man shows up.
Yeah.
Because you're not showing up as a little girl. You ain't showing up like a little boy.
Nope.
You show up as a responsible man.
Exactly.
So that's problematic.
Exactly. And it's okay. It's okay for people to have a problem with what I do and how I do it because I don't care, right? Why should we care? Right? The world is a competitive world. You have to go out and fight for what you want, and you fight for the people you care about. You play for your team. You don't score touchdowns for the other team and think that you're gonna win a Super Bowl that way. You don't, right? So in reality, to sort of conclude to your point, I think that justice for each other would just be us concluding that it's important for us to give our best to ech other. When I got married. People said, well, why didn't you marry a white woman? I said, well, because I'd never looked at a white woman. Not that I don't like them or that there's something wrong with them. Yeah. But I felt like the biggest investment I would ever make is who I choose to spend my life with. Like, I feel like, okay, I'm bringing some weight to the table. I'm bringing some assets and everything else. So if I'm going to, if I claim to be an advocate for my community, then why would I take the best of me and give it away to someone else? I said, no, there's got to be a good Black woman. There's some good Black women in here I can pick. I ain't got to, so not to disparage anybody else's choice, but I think we got to choose each other, not just in relationships, but choose each other in business. When you get your skill set and you're deciding, like, what am I going to do with my 40 hours a week? I think that if we're trained in the right way and are able to think expansively in terms of institution building, then we can turn that inward. Like your 7 children, for example. What I already know is going to happen, I don't even have to say it, is that when they get older and they realize how much skill they have, they're going to get on the phone with each other. They're going to have family business meetings, and they're going to make a plan. They're going to take some capital, invest it, and create institutions of their own because they're going to see the immediate economic benefit to themselves as well as to their own children by having things that you actually own. If you own and you control nothing in America, you have no power. Justice will always evade you if you don't own anything.
If you don't have economic power.
You have to have economic power.
All right. Speaking of families, what are like practical steps, basics that every family, every father and mother should be teaching their kids when it comes to finance?
Man, that was crazy what you just said though about, these one of them has to be a lawyer, doctor, all that. My sister went to medical school and she dropped out because she didn't like it. And she worked with my mother, convinced her to go back to medical school. And so she got back in and she ended up becoming a doctor. Mm-hmm. And that really came in handy. Last year, my mother passed Christmas Eve. And that slow decline toward death my sister was a lifesaver during that time. You know what I mean? Like having a medical doctor in the house made a big difference. And we reflected on that. I said, yeah, remember when mama convinced you to go back to medical school? This is great. I'm so glad that she did that. So that's real. That's really real. And what you talked about just now reflects another aspect of investing that people sometimes forget, which is not only is most wealth not tied to money, most investing is not tied to money. Your biggest investments you make are in people. People. And capitalism, sometimes it makes you forget about the value of people. Yeah. Like, when my parents got older and needed me and my sister and my brother to step up for them, and my father was thanking me for doing this and doing that, and I said, you don't got to thank me. You invested in me. This is just repayment of an investment you made 20, 30, 40 years ago because he's not my biological father. I said, you know what? When you were 23 years old, you could have been running the streets. A lot of guys would have said, well, why would you go take care of some other lady's baby? You could be out here and get a bunch of girlfriends or whatever.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be a father. He wanted to be a husband. He said, no, that's my son. And that's my responsibility. So when he got older, I was part of his retirement plan. See, so what you said was really powerful right there. Now, in terms of what parents can do to get the kids ready for the future, I tell parents, don't overthink it. Don't overthink. If you want to go the extra mile and get them really trained up, it's almost like.
I'm like, do we need to roll in the black business school? Like, golly,
well,
I'm like, come on, it's summertime. We got to do this stuff. We got to get these kids right.
Man, so here's the thing, right? That we do have stuff like that, right? We have something called Black Millionaires of Tomorrow in the Black Business School. We got flashcards, workbooks, all kinds of stuff. So those tools are there. But what I try to do is say, start with the basics, right? So think about it like this. Let's say your child, if they're properly trained, they could end up becoming the next LeBron James as a basketball player. That doesn't mean you have to necessarily do basketball every day and force it on them. You could just let them play after school and join the school team or just expose them to basketball or whatever, the sport that they might be good at. And then they'll find their way to becoming whatever they're going to be.
Make it lifestyle.
Exactly. They'll dig right. So like I don't think LeBron's mama had him, talking about basketball 24 hours a day when he was 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
He just got exposed to it, right? And then he eventually evolved out of that. I think the same thing is true with wealth, right? A lot of people that are serious about their kids and their economics feel like they have to have their children take classes, which I'm not against that, because if you think about that, though, we have systems that are designed to mass produce millions of Black boys that want to be basketball and football players.
Yeah.
Right. We teach them how to rap and how to twerk when they're 5, 6, 7 years old. So teaching them economics early is something that we should do, because we don't know if they're going to be a professional athlete. They probably won't be.
They probably won't.
Right.
The chances are very, very, very slim.
Exactly. But they are going to compete in the game of life, which requires money. They're going to have to solve problems when they're 35 years old and they got a spouse and 2 kids. That's going to involve money, right? Yeah. So you're getting them ready for the big game, which is the game of life. Now, what I would say to people is basic stuff. Number one, every child in our community and beyond, anybody listening, your children, you should be buying stock for the family before the kids are even born, as early as possible. Why? Well, because time. I cannot put into words how valuable time is when you use it right. What do I mean by that? Let's say you go back to the year 2000, and let's say you had a parent who says, I don't have a lot of money, but I'm going to buy, every time I buy a new iPhone, I'm going to buy some Apple stock to go with it, $1,000 worth. So let's say they bought $1,000 a year of Apple stock, which would be $83 a month. Most people have bills that are bigger than $83 a month. Yeah. That person would have about $850,000 right now, right? Wow. So the small amounts add up to the big amounts, but you have to use the power of time. Because building
can't wait.
Right.
Just do it.
Right. Don't wait. The even before your child is even thought about, right? I'm talking about, I was talking to a 21-year-old. I said, do you have any kids? He said, no. I said, you're going to have kids? He said, yeah, maybe in a decade. I said, yeah. So you start investing now because you've got all this time, right? And you can make sure your child never has to work again. They'll be really happy that their father was thinking about them before. Or like when I talked to our youngest, I took her to the dentist and I said, I was investing in you before I even knew about you, before you even a concept. I was investing in you 30 years ago. But she said, but I'm only 14. I said, exactly. But I knew one day you would exist. And I knew that on that day, you would need me to be able to spend time with you and take you to the dentist and spend the afternoon with you instead of me having to go to work. Yeah. So I was preparing for this life 20 or 30 years before it actually happened. Battles are won before they begin. Mm-hmm. Sun Tzu in The Art of War, he says that. So my point would be that every family needs to own stock. That's where the money is. There should be a budget or a piece of your budget that's going toward buying stock. It's not just for the kids. It's for the family. Mm. Why do I say that? Well, because you'd be amazed how many people don't really want to sacrifice for their kids, right? Yeah. But here's the thing: wealth is like a car or a house. Like you and your wife live in this awesome house, and then one day someone else will use the house if you keep it in the family, right? Mm-hmm. So me investing for the kids does not mean I'm sacrificing something from myself.
Yeah.
I can have both, right? So invest for yourself, buy stock consistently. If you do that, if you have a couple $200, $300 a month going toward the stock market when the children are little, then those children, by the time they're in their 20s, actually, they wouldn't have to actually work for anybody ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
What else?
So buy stock and start earlier rather than later. Do it now.
Yes. And every child should know how to start a business by the age of 12.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, what that means is knowing the basics. So you could literally put them in a camp or something, or have them go through maybe give them $20 to go through a little business mini course or something online, and spend maybe, I'm going to say probably less than 10 hours of work could at least plant the seed of understanding ownership and structure and delegation. Now, if you want to go deeper, one model that we use with our kids in the Black Business School is we use a model called STURDY. We want to build sturdy children, STERDY.
Okay.
STURDY stands for children who understand systems, technology, entrepreneurship, relationships, and delegation. The Y just stands for youth. Why is that important? Well, because people who think in terms of systems are not thinking, oh, I just want to get a job. They're thinking, I'll create an infrastructure that will create jobs for other people. So you don't you don't have the sort of the one successful Negro syndrome. You have the successful person who says, I want to build infrastructure so others can win. I want my success to be contagious. Or like me even being a professor. I could have sat there and taught 30 students at a time, but instead I'm thinking about scale. Okay, how do I teach 3,000 people at a time, right?
How do I duplicate myself?
There you go, exactly.
Yeah.
Technology is critical because technology runs the world. I'd say at least more 50 to 60% of the world's wealth is created in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So technology is critical. They know technology. It makes it easier to scale your system. Entrepreneurship, the fact that it's easier to fill out the form for an LLC than it is to fill out a job application. So ultimately understanding the world as an entrepreneur gives them a type of economic sight where they can see wealth, even if it doesn't show up in the form of a job. A lot of people can't see wealth if it doesn't come with a paycheck attached.
Yeah.
Relationships are critical because when you're building your economic gang, your ecosystem, individuals, human beings will be part of that system. My ability to form healthy relationships with other people becomes part of my financial security. When you and I met, we were decent to each other, respectful to each other.
Yeah.
You didn't show up as this sort of this arrogant. Because you could have. You've accomplished a lot. I looked at. I told my wife.
You have too.
I told my wife. I said his first touchdown catch was from Tom Brady. Oh my God! Right? But you never would have guessed that, right? Because you know the value of other human beings, right? And same thing is true. I'm sure I got some things I could brag about. We could have overlooked each other. We could have competed with each other, but instead we chose to collaborate.
Yeah.
Right. And you've seen examples where that doesn't happen. If you look, for example, in hip hop culture, which has a heavy influence on Black males, hip hop culture is very competitive. I got on the phone. Kanye West called me one time at when we were doing our convention. I was on the phone for like 12 hours. And we got 12 hours. Yeah, I mean, he said a lot to say. And we were just talking. Yeah, and I was telling my wife, I said, I don't even know how we can work together because he's so busy reminding me of how important he is and how he's better than me and better than everybody else. That's not good energy. You can't build when you don't have collaborative energy. That's why hip hop has never built anything for the Black community. Hip hop only, it's like, look at me, I'm the best. But it's like, no, we're the best together, right? Why can't I be great and still acknowledge your greatness?
Side note, what could hip hop have built for the Black community?
It could have built a lot. I mean, you're talking about
because you were talking about billions of dollars.
The cultural influence. Well, first off, if we had more of a business-oriented mindset, let's imagine if the Jewish community had discovered hip hop. Imagine if hip hop, instead of being discovered in the South Bronx,
they funded it.
Right,
they bankrolled it.
Right, they saw the value, the economic. They saw the business side. Right, look at like Whitney Houston, Clive Davis. That's not hip hop, but still, Clive Davis wasn't trying to be the best singer in the world. He was trying to be a lawyer. Yeah. Right? Because he understood contracts and business and structure, right? So imagine if instead of hip hop being discovered in the South Bronx, it had been discovered in the Jewish section of Bed-Stuy or something.
Yeah.
First thing that would have happened is people would have protected that intellectual property. They would have made sure that they tried to control the distribution and control the monetization of the product. They wouldn't just be thinking about the party. They'd be thinking about the after party. They'd be thinking about the power that comes with the party. You see? So really, to some extent, if we're overly focused on the production side, the entertainment side, we're missing the distribution monetization side where a lot of the money gets made and a lot of the power gets obtained.
And a lot of that is a lack of not only understanding, but also it's resources, because if you don't have resources, then you're slave to the lender. You're slave to the lender. And you're just trying to get your stuff heard.
Well, you are, but the thing about it is that here's the deal. Here's the challenge of being Black in America when you talk about money. We'll never have more money than white people do. Like, we won't. I mean, it's, and it's not nothing against white people. It's just they have the white male in America is the richest individual on the planet, right? Not all of them, but you know what I mean, collectively. So that does not mean, though, that we can't have wealth and we can't have power. It just means we have to think about it a little bit carefully, a little bit more carefully. Meaning, my question for you, for example, as a Black man would be, okay, you got some money, but that guy down the street might have more money, and he might see what you have and say, gosh, if I could buy what he has, I could do more with it. So I'm going to go and buy what he has. And of course, he's going to sell it to me because I have more money than him. Well, the question I would ask you is...
He's got vision and I don't.
Well, maybe, or maybe you do have vision. What I would say to you is, what do you own that money cannot buy? That's how you trump it all.
What do I own?
What do you have that money cannot buy? Or are you always for sale? And the answer is definitely, I know it's going to be no. I'm going to answer, I know it's going to be no.
I mean, you saw a lot of what I own.
Right.
And them people.
Right.
That are part of my life.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So the key to ownership and power and not being a slave to capitalism is to understand that me not being a slave to capitalism doesn't mean I have to go and take what everybody else has got. I don't have to have more money than you to be free from whatever you're trying to do to me. You understand?
Because part of that is mindset.
What's that again?
Because part of that is mindset.
Yeah, like if somebody came along and said, "I'll give you $1 billion to own the Black Business School," I would say, "No, thank you."
Yeah.
Why? Because we make enough money. We're okay. We got something here that money can't buy. You can't write a check big enough to own this because it's just because I'm going to decide that. You understand?
Yeah.
And I think that this is where the conversation about money has to be nuanced. If you teach hardcore capitalism, it kind of just says everything's for sale. Human life is for sale. Your daughters are for sale. You know what I mean? Some things should not be for sale.
And that doesn't bode well for those who are already systemically oppressed.
Right. If you're systemically...
It's okay for those who aren't, but it doesn't bode well for you.
Well,
for those who are in that position.
Let me tell you, it doesn't work for anybody. See, money can be a demon. If you don't control it, it will control you. Mm-hmm. There are multi-millionaire slaves out here. There are people that have $100 million in the bank who are still not in control of their lives, right? You look at what went down with Diddy and everything, around that. Yeah. A lot of wealthy people were at those parties doing things that they now regret. Yeah. And it was maybe because they wanted to get next to the bright, shiny object. They wanted more fame, power, all these temptations that are kind of thrown at us, right? And so really, I think that you can't really talk about money properly unless you talk about, like, what are your values? Like, what do you, we know you value money, but what do you value outside of money? And then when you do that, what happens is you're looking at money, you're appreciating the power of money, but you see money as part of a bigger portfolio. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I got my money over here. I want my money. I want to make as much money as possible, but I got these other things. I got my wife. I got my kids. I got my health. I got my spirituality. All these other things are things that money cannot buy. And I don't know if everybody has that conversation with themselves. So this idea, I think it would be incorrect for us to assume that just because the people down the street have more money than us, that they automatically can just come and buy whatever they want or control us. That's not true. You could be financially free and not have a whole lot of money.
So even in hip hop, as we mentioned, there could have been so much done. Schools.
There could have been so much more.
Job training. There could have been stocks bought for communities. There could have been all those sorts of things.
Yes.
But it became individualistic and competitive.
Individualistic, competitive, but it wasn't just hip hop. Hip hop did not do that.
Yeah.
They bastardized hip hop. Don't forget that.
Yeah, that's true.
The 90s. I think
That's true.
I really believe all those conspiracies about CIA and all that.
Yeah,
If I wanted to control black people, I would have taken over hip hop. And they turned it into something that even we didn't recognize.
Yeah.
And it became, I think the Diddy trial is a culmination of 20 or 30 years of this behavior that is really foreign to who we are as a people.
Yeah.
But with that said, though, I think that what would have changed the trajectory of hip hop is if you'd had some people in the community who weren't just thinking about the entertainment side, but were also thinking deeply about the business side. It wouldn't have taken much. I think just for example, my daughter is a really talented singer, dancer, actress. She's very pretty, like a mama, and I already see all this stuff that's going to happen. We take her to an audition. They always love her.
Yeah.
And so we have conversations about just boundaries of just, okay, some things are okay, some things are not for you. Some places you don't want to be, or when you make a business decision, you have to think about the whole thing. Don't just get excited about being put on the stage where you'll sign anything, because that's what people do. They will sign anything just to be famous.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that they've got all these other things that are happening financially that you're not a part of now. So 20 years later, you're saying, well, they stole my masters. They took this from me. They exploited me with the contract. And let's just be honest. A lot of people don't even read the contract.
Yeah.
Right?
They're just happy they made it there and somebody offered them a contract.
Yeah. Yeah. It's desperation. That's another reason why financial security is so important, is that capitalism is really designed to exploit economic desperation. Especially if the economic desperation comes with no moral and ethical boundaries, right? Where you're willing to throw those boundaries out the door to get access to somebody's money or fame or power. I think that's what Diddy did. I think Diddy, to the extent that you believe that he did harm some people, I don't know about the trial, and people can make their opinion about that.
Yeah.
But for many years, I'd heard stuff, right? And I knew people that said, "Oh, I don't even go into that space." And what I could really see is I thought about how many people really would have given anything to be in the room with him, right? How many of our young people? I met a young lady, that went to school in Atlanta, and she said, "Well, yeah, when I went to college, all I wanted to do was work for Diddy. Like that, that was my life plan, my life goal." And I was like, "Well, why would that just be that's your whole life objective, was to like go and chase this man around?" And so that makes you vulnerable. You're wide open for exploitation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So with our kids, the desperation piece, I think, is key also, because the financial security does allow you not to jump at any and everything. And that's what we want for our kids. So you mentioned the stocks. You mentioned the kids need to learn how to start a business, and they can do that by watching videos. Doesn't cost a lot to get a short course. Right. And there was a third thing.
Ownership. Just knowing ownership, starting with real estate, knowing that ownership is power. A lot of times we misassess what it means to be financially successful. For example, I've heard people say, well, how's so-and-so doing? Oh, he's doing good. Well, how do you know he's doing good? Oh, well, look at the car he's driving. Look at the clothes he's wearing. Look at the apartment that he's living in. Those are not symbols of financial security. For all we know, he could have borrowed all those things. He could be in debt because of all these things, right? And so really kind of knowing what it really means to be financially secure is incredibly important. Typically, financial security does not come from a job. It also does not connect directly to income. Income is an opportunity to be financially secure, but if your income does not exceed your expenses, then you're not getting any closer to financial security.
So like ownership, like practically for a kid to understand ownership,
yes.
What should they learn exactly, and what should they be owning? Are you advocating for buying
real estate
things for your kids?
Yeah, real estate.
Buy real estate.
Real estate appreciates in value every generation. If you buy good real estate in good areas, it goes up in value. Ownership of stock. Owning stock is the quickest way to start a business in 30 seconds. Just get on your app, buy you some stock, and that's it. And then when you're teaching kids about it, make it fun. Like what I do, the way I taught my kids about stock, I could teach them a million things, but they ain't gonna listen. Yeah. What I do is when we were in line at McDonald's, I said, let me show you a trick. And they're like, what? I said, we can own a percentage of McDonald's in 30 seconds. They're like, how can you own McDonald's? You can't buy McDonald's in 30 seconds. I said, yeah, I can. Let me show you. I got on the stock on Robinhood, and I bought 20 shares of McDonald's stock. And I said, okay, now we own a percentage of McDonald's. When they make money, we make money.
Yeah.
And what that does is it's not just an economic lesson. And they actually, for a minute,
it's practical. It's a practical lesson.
It was very practical.
Exciting, yeah.
And also it builds pride, right? When I say to the kids, our family owns a piece of McDonald's. Our family owns Starbucks. Our family owns Disney. That just fills them up in a certain way. You have a certain, see, the thing about legacy is that people tend to invest in the things they value. And they value the things that they feel others have invested in, right? So if I tell the children, like, this is who we are, this is what we've got, this is what we represent, that not only makes them feel proud of what they have and make them want to be a part of it and to invest in it, instead of doing the opposite, which is, my family ain't nothing. I got to go out in the world and find my worth, right? I'm not sending my children out into the world with that void. You're not going to have a financial void. You're not going to have an emotional void. You're not going to have a self-esteem void because what happens then, you show up and you're just empty. Then others start pouring into you, and whatever they pour into you could be poisonous.
I think that ownership piece is huge too when we talk about Black communities and home ownership. Business, you mentioned business ownership. There's a certain amount of pride when you own something, and when you're in a community and you don't own anything, it's not that you shouldn't have pride, but you do see a difference there. Lastly, I want to get to just how should we, be advocating? Like, how should we be pushing our elected officials on topics of economic justice? Like, are there certain, not necessarily asking you certain policies, I'm not asking you that, but I'm just saying, what is the framework for how we push our representatives to address the host of issues of economic injustice that we just talked about?
Okay, first I'm going to start off with something that sounds cynical. I'm not even...
Or should we?
Well, I think that we should.
Because I know how you feel a little bit about, politics.
You talked about our representatives, and I'm like, y'all ain't representing.
Y'all ain't representing.
These are not our representatives.
Respond to that.
Well, think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about the student.
They're not.
Well, think about the student loan crisis, right?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Well, that came from, I think, around 06, 07. I guess Biden and Clinton and others got together, and they pushed through a bill that basically said that you can't write off your student loans even in a bankruptcy, right? What constituency in America got together and said, we're going to demand our politicians make a law that says we can't, declare bankruptcy on our student loans? The people did not ask for that. The banks did. The banks were like, we loaned out all this money. We need y'all to protect us. We paid you for it to protect us, so do your job.
So you're beholden to us.
Right. We got you in office, so you owe us a favor.
Yeah.
And so politicians, I believe they work for the people that have the money. I really believe that. Now, to the extent that they're willing to hear you, because here's the thing, they need your vote, right? And the simple agreement is, I go to the rich guy and I say, here, I need $1 billion to buy a bunch of votes, which basically is I need to buy a bunch of campaign ads.
Yeah.
The rich guy says, okay, I'll give you the $1 billion to go buy these little sheep because they'll believe anything they see on TV. But when you get done, you come see me because I need you to give me that government contract.
Yeah, I got a list of things I need you to do.
Exactly, right? So we're the sheep. We're the ones who get manipulated by all the ad spend. And so they do need something from us. But in order to get something, it's contingent upon something that I think could be possibly unrealistic, which is to expect the sheep to not act like sheep, right? I know that among the so-called sheep, there are some thinkers. There are some people that say, I'm not a sheep. I'm not going to believe anything you put on TV. I need you to do this, this, and this. I don't think that's the majority. But
it's not a critical mass of them.
Right, but let's pretend. Let's pretend like that's the majority.
Just for the sake of the question.
Right, so the Black community, because sometimes it happens, right? I think the Black community showed a little bit of resistance in the last election, which I think got them on their toes a little bit. So if they show up and they say, well, what do you want? First off, if you talk about the Black community, I get really tired of them saying that there is no Black agenda and that there is no Black economic plan. They said that's even back when Obama was in office. They used to say, well, we would give Black people something, but we don't know what they want. They don't have a plan. People had a plan, but you'll never hear the plan if all you do is you talk to Al Sharpton. right? They weren't talking to people that had the plan. Dr. Claude Anderson had a plan.
You had a plan in 2010.
It
was economics, education, and incarceration.
Boom. There you go. Well, that was part of it for sure.
Yeah,
and it was one of these things where it was like, okay, I get it now. It's like if I say, is anybody hungry in the room? And this guy over here is like, yeah, I'm hungry. I want to say it. I'm like, and I'm looking at you. I'm like, well, Ben, are you hungry? And you say, no, I'm good. I say, well, nobody's hungry, huh? And he's like, no, I want a cheeseburger. Ben, are you hungry? No, but no, I'm not. Okay, well, I guess nobody wants any food. Yeah. That's what it is, right? We have these false leaders that somehow are positioned to advocate for everybody.
Yeah.
And they, instead of asking people that really understand the issue and have the expertise, they'll go to the false leader and he says, oh, everything's fine, boss. Or no, this is what everybody wants. And so lots of people had an economic plan. It's not hard to create an economic plan that would help lots of people in our community, but they're not listening to the right people. So I think that will be the first thing I'd want to see is, are you inviting the right people to the table, and are you implementing what they say? So, so really for me, if I was to say what we should advocate for, one thing, access to capital. Access to capital means if you got intelligent people that want to start businesses and they need $250,000 to get off the ground, make it easy for them to get that money to get off the ground. If you got a business owner over here that's struggling and he built a business with his or her bare hands and it found a way to make $100,000 a year with that business, give them $1 million so that they can expand that thing and hire more people, right? That's important. What else? I would say that a lot more support in terms of not so much people giving us just the jobs, but we build the businesses that create the jobs. Same thing with schools. When they talk about education for Black people, they always talk about ways that we can get a better education while other people are controlling the schools.
Yeah.
And that's another old trick. Here's what happens in Chicago. In Chicago, they had some Black principals that were actually running some of the schools that were actually getting results, especially with the boys. They had some brothers from the Nation of Islam that were working with the guys and going into the gang affiliated areas and really getting these guys to do productive things with their lives. And then they fired them and they replaced them with like white female teachers, who don't understand the culture. Yeah. And so I think that we should have more schools run by us where we're educating our kids. I don't know if they're ever going to do it, but that to me it takes us back before the civil rights movement, where our ancestors, they actually knew some things that we don't know. Like we traded land and businesses and owning our own schools for corporate jobs and student loans.
So do you think the civil rights? See, I want to ask this question. Not that those who were civil rights leaders that they knew what was going to happen in 2025.
No.
But do you think that the aftermath of the civil rights movement going from, I guess, the 70s or so until now has been beneficial or detrimental to Black economic power?
I'll ask you this question. First, let's talk about the economics. Is Black wealth up or down since the 60s? Has the racial wealth gap shrank or gotten bigger?
It's grown.
Right.
And it's growing.
Are our kids better or worse educated now than they were 50 years ago?
Everything I read,
on average,
worse.
Worse, yeah.
I know our reading proficiency is terrible.
Right. Are our families more stable now or less stable than they were 50 years ago?
We have higher divorce rates. We have more out of wedlock birth.
Right. So my question would be,
you have less ownership.
Right. Exactly. So when people say, "Oh, look at all the progress we've made," I'm like, okay, show me evidence. I believe evidence. Yeah. Show me proof. And so I will say, even though the civil rights movement had the right spirit, and I think that we should honor those individuals that pour their heart and soul into doing the best that they knew to do. But even Dr. King started to evolve toward the end of his life when he started speaking about money and the civil rights, in addition to the civil rights. And really started to question even his own philosophies about what he thought integration could really do. that was, in my opinion, the Dr. King that would have been a more effective leader, a more practical leader than the young guy that we actually remember. They just killed him too soon, right? And I think that older guy also would have worked with Malcolm X because Malcolm had a lot of the right ideas as it pertained to the importance of maintaining some degree of sovereignty, even as you're integrating. See, integration is not bad. Integration is connecting. It's a partnership, right? There's nothing wrong with that. The problem with integration is that if you form a partnership and you don't have certain conditions and terms under which the partnership will operate, then you can create a system of exploitation.
Because it's not really partnership.
Exactly. There you go.
Partnership is a coming together and shared sovereignty and shared power.
Yes.
And compromise.
Yes.
That's not what happened.
No. It's like y'all shut down the Negro Leagues and we'll give Jackie Robinson the job. Right? That's exactly. Like, no, we don't need to shut down the Negro Leagues. Yeah. You know, and that and so we kind of got rope-a-doped a little bit in that. You know, I think that and it wasn't just someone else's fault. It wasn't just their fault. It was our fault too. Yeah. Because I think that we inherently really felt that just being closer to white folks makes us somehow better or purer, or we would put them on pedestals even when they don't ask to be put on the pedestal. We still want to do that just because we're so accustomed to that.
The psychological piece.
Right. Exactly. So it's a two-way street. You know, so in a way, integration is like marriage. Marriage is not a bad thing, but a bad marriage is a horrible thing.
You're right about that.
Exactly.
Let's keep praying for our marriages.
Right.
So there we go. So we keep the party going.
I got a prayer on deck when we walk out of here.
Hey, I so appreciate this conversation. I feel like, golly, there's just so many different things and avenues that we can go down. But the idea of economic power and justice, and the fact that without economic power, there really is no justice. So I love what you're doing. I love the educational piece, the fact that you're in this lane, blazing trails. And challenging people and equipping people that have been impacted by injustice. This is called the Just Life Podcast. And so we ask everybody, the just life means what? So for you, the just life means?
Freedom. I think freedom. Simple, right? When I talk to my kids about what they want to do when they grow up, I'm like, I just want you to be happy. You know, like I'm almost sound like a hippie, you know. It's like, should I be a dentist or a doctor or whatever? I'm like, should you really be defined by what you do for a living? You know, like you're more than your profession. And to me, when I had the conversation with my daughter about that, I said, well, have you ever heard of the inalienable rights? She said, no, what's that? I said, well, that's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I said, okay, so you know what life means. You know what it means to be alive. And we kind of know what liberty means. That's freedom, right? That's important. And then I said, look at the happiness part. It's not life, liberty, and happiness. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I said, the way I interpret that is that happiness may not always be right where you stand, but you have the right to pursue happiness, whether you're pursuing it in your mind or pursuing it physically or whatever it is, right? And I said, most people can't pursue happiness on a daily basis because they got to go to work that day, right? So I said, so if happiness is over there, I want to have the freedom to walk over there where the happiness is at. And I said, if you are able to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then you're going to have a pretty good life. And you won't necessarily have to worry about whether or not the world gives you justice because you'll be able to create justice for yourself. So I think justice starts internally. You know, are you being fair to yourself? Are you showing love to yourself and the people around you? Are you putting yourself in just environments where you're gonna be respected and treated the way you should be? And then you still have to deal with the rest of the world because sometimes the world doesn't do what we want it to do. But I can't control all of that. But I can't control me. So to me, a just life starts internally. It has to start internally. It cannot start with me expecting another person to change their behavior because they may never change.
That's Dr. Boyce Watkins, and this is The Just Life. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, brother.